Hello, everyone, and welcome to Nugentino Cinema. Here again today with Kay. How are you?
Hey, I'm good. How are you?
I'm good. So today we're here to review Shortcuts, the 1993 Robert Altman film. It's the second Robert Altman film that we've reviewed together. I think it's the second one I've done on the review in general. Um, but yeah, it's one of my favorite movies. I have the Blu-ray right here. I was just watching some. There's a lot of like special features on it. Um, if you consider the fact this is like a 3-hour movie, there's like over 5 hours of content on here. Because it's like an hour and a half documentary. There's like an interview with Tim Robbins and Robert Altman. There's a lot of good stuff. But I was just going through all of it, and yeah, I love the movie. I've seen it like 8 times. Yeah, over the course of like 10 years. The first time I saw it was probably 2013, as far as I can remember. But yeah, I've seen it a lot since then.
Cool. Is the documentary on there just like a making of, or is it something else?
Yeah, it's pretty much a making of. Like, there's a lot of behind the scenes footage and like footage on the set of them filming and whatnot, and then interviews with like the cast and crew and Robert Altman,
Cool.
and it's pretty good. Yeah,
And this is based off of some writing, right? Do they talk about that as well?
yeah. They talk about that. It's based on a bunch of short stories by Raymond Carver, which
Okay.
interestingly, he I guess he was from the Pacific Northwest, and he I guess died like at age 50, but he was pretty famous, and I guess he worked mostly in short stories. But
Hmm.
Birdman was actually not based on, but like inspired by some of his writings,
Interesting.
and the play within Birdman that Michael Keaton puts on is based on like a Raymond Carver story, or the play that he's doing in the movie.
I had no idea he was like so intertwined with film. That's really cool.
Yeah, and there's actually a movie, and I've never seen it, but I forget what it's called. It has a weird name. It's like Jin to Win or something, but it's based on one of the stories that's in this movie. The
Hmm.
stories of the story of the fishermen who find the dead body. That's
Hmm.
its own standalone short story, and there's actually a movie based on just that. But they kind of take it in a different direction, like kind of have like a like serial killer element, like that they add in. So I thought it was interesting how they cut together this like this tapestry of stories. Him and the screenwriter, who I hadn't heard of before. I guess his name was Frank Barheit. But yeah, just how they interwove it, and I feel like the stories are all different, and they all have like different things going on. But I do think he like ultimately achieves like some sort of cohesion. And yeah, I just really think it's cool how they did the movie.
Yeah, definitely. So it was it like if you know, was it a book of short stories and they were like, let's just make this into one larger story, or were they with like separate and they just chose these to put into one film? Do you know?
I'm not totally sure. I think it was like some of them were in the same collection, but there were others that were in different collections. So I think they're kind of separated. Like it wasn't like just like one book of short stories.
Huh.
I think Robert Altman like it's original in a way because it's original the way he connected it, and like all of Raymond Carver's writings take place in the Pacific Northwest, and this takes place in L.A. So he chose to move it to L.A.
Hmm.
And it was interesting. He talked about that in the documentary a little bit. He talked about how like he thought it was more interesting to have it in a bigger arena, like have it in like a giant city where you think you can have like a large group of people and have them sort of intertwine. Um, but yeah, he also added some characters. Like I know the jazz singer, um, like the mother who's a jazz singer is like a wholly like original character. Like she wasn't any of the short stories. And with her, it's also interesting because I don't think she's an actress. She's just a jazz singer.
Hmm.
Actually, I think she did well for considering if she hadn't acted much before. But yeah, I think there's a lot of stuff he added, but there's still pieces of the short stories in there.
Did he talk about why he chose those stories if they were pulled from different places?
He didn't talk about too much about why he chose specific ones.
That's fair.
And I'm sure there are reasons, but yeah, I didn't hear too much from the documentary that I watched. But um,
I ask because I'm just curious, and with you having seen this 8 times, I'm just trying to kind of figure out like what the intention with the story was, like what he was trying to say with this film. And so I thought maybe there was some like through line that he saw in these various stories that he wanted to pull together, or what. So yeah, do you kind of have a take on what you think he was trying to do with the story?
Yeah, for sure. I just think it's like, well, one, it's interesting. I mean, the reason I got into Robert Altman in general is because I loved Paul Thomas Anderson, and I became like a really big fan of Paul Thomas Anderson. And I know that he is very inspired by Robert Altman. And this movie, Shortcut specifically, has been noted as like a major influence on Magnolia. And
Hmm.
there's big connections to Magnolia. Like if you look at the way them, and spoiler alert, like I'm just gonna spoil anything. So if you haven't seen this movie, then tune out now and go watch it. But yeah, the ending, the way it ends, and you've seen Magnolia, right? Okay, just making sure. But yeah, so the way this movie ends, Magnolia ends with a rain of frogs, and this ends an earthquake. And it's interesting how it's the same kind of device. Like you connect all these characters, and it's obviously interlocking stories. The difference is I think that Magnolia is more melodramatic. It's more just like centered on going through characters who are very depressed and have like a lot of issues, and being about like a certain type of depression, I think. But I think Shortcuts is more, it's kind of a comedy drama in a weird way, and like there's a lot of dark stuff going on, but I think it's sort of just about life at like a grand scale. Um and just the interesting connections that happen. Like you don't know, like say you talk to somebody and you're just talking to them, but you don't know them that well, and they leave. And then like days later, you could just like pass by that person's mom randomly, but you wouldn't know any better. Like, but then there's interesting connections that are happening all the time that we don't even know about, and you see that like at like many different levels here. Like you see like there's connections I didn't even pick up on that I just picked up on this first time watch, or not first time watch, this watch, which is like the eighth watch. Like when Tim Robbins, who's the cop character, he abandons a dog, his family's dog, and he goes back, and because he feels bad, he wants to like make his family happy. He goes back to where the dog was and gets it back, but it's not with a family, and he takes it from that family, and that guy who he takes it from is the fisherman. It's Huey Lewis from Huey Lewis on the News. But he's a fisherman that was on the fishing thing where they discover the dead body, and just like weird little things like that. You have and then just like weird connections where like another one of the fishermen, they go to like a photo booth, and and he has the pictures of the dead body that they found in the water, and then Lily Taylor, who's Robert Downey Jr.'s girlfriend, with Jennifer Jason Leigh, she has pictures of her like in dead body makeup. So they both find these pictures of like dead bodies, one real and one fake, and like look at them and then like are both creeped out, and then like are like exchanging, like memorizing license plate numbers to report them. And just like weird little connections that happen that you don't even, that are just like really bizarre, and like things like that can like happen like all the time. Like just like, I'm not saying to that level, but like, although I'm sure it does happen in some ways, but just like when you like walk by, like I've had things where like I always like seem to like, I notice like patterns, and maybe I just sound completely crazy right now, but whenever I do a lot of like door dashing, and sometimes I'll notice like weird patterns. Like say I'll go to an apartment and I'll deliver to this apartment, and that apartment, like I'll deliver to the apartment on the left, and then like on the left, like right by the gate, I'm just, and I'll deliver to the second story, and then right as I deliver to the second story, there's somebody walking their dog right there, and then like I'll leave, and later I'll get another apartment order, and it'll be the same thing. It'll be on the left, there'll be somebody walking their dog, and it's on the second story, and this is all on the same day, like just like weird coincidences. And I don't know if I just sound completely nuts right now, but I just think this movie captures like the weird way like life works in some way.
Yeah, that's how I feel a lot about like Richard Linklater's work, and this makes me think a lot of like Slacker in the way that he would connect stories with those little things. Um,
Mhm.
and in fact, in Slacker, like one of the opening scenes, someone gets hit by a car, so it's kind of
Yeah.
funny. I wasn't really thinking about that while watching the movie, but just kind of your comment on interconnection. But yeah, I just feel like I wonder because that is like such a curious thing to make a film about, and I definitely am also like very interested in the way that like we very subtly brush against each other, and I feel like it's addressed a lot in film too because it is such like a weird thing, and then sometimes you'll have these people come back around in your life in a completely different way, and just you don't even realize the impact. Um, so it just makes me wonder, like with this film, like why he chose these characters and why he chose like these situations to tell the story. Because for me, like as much as it is very like obviously you explained, it's like the interconnectability of life, or interconnections of life, and just kind of life on this macro and micro scale and shifting between these things. Um, but I mean, for me, it just felt like a lot of these people are like very, like they're very despicable people. A lot of them are just like very, like there's not really any good people in the film, and I guess that's part of the point. But it also just feels um, like why that way? And then also just kind of like I don't know. I just found myself wondering a lot about the choices and like why these people and why these situations, and like if there was something larger, like what I kind of was pulling a little bit, and I'm curious if you agree with this, is kind of just like this idea of everyone like putting on appearances and airs and stuff too.
Mhm.
And then this whole thing of like around certain people you're a certain way and others you're another way. And I feel like it shows really well with like Claire the clown, and she even has this bit of dialogue where she's like near the end at the party, she's like, oh, I can take this all off and just be like another me. And so
Yeah,
I
I was
feel
thinking
like
about that a
there's a
lot. Yeah.
yeah, so there's like a lot of like putting on appearances and like, oh, I'm gonna go do this because we're about to have company over, and the way that they kind of like make themselves appear. Even like the jazz singer that you mentioned, like she's, this like artist and like very suave and like kind of aloof at her work, and then she's just like this total wreck at home.
Yeah.
So I wonder if like if you agree with any of that, or if you find like any I don't know. What do you what do you think?
Well, it's interesting with Claire the Clown and how they go to that part or that like, dinner with Julianne Moore. I find it interesting how I heard this talked about a little bit in the documentary, but like how they're both like holding things back. Um like Julianne Moore and her husband are fighting because it's revealed that she cheated, and they're having this whole thing. Um and they're having this whole argument, and then Claire the Clown and her husband are like having this argument because he discovered a dead body, and he didn't do anything about it, and she feels terribly about that. And but they both decide like we need to go to this dinner, and they're almost using the dinner as like an excuse to get away from their feelings and like not confront them, and like not confront their significant other, or not do something that's like uncomfortable, even though like throughout the dinner they're making offhanded remarks about it, like jokingly, that like the other person won't get, or like the other couple. But it seems like their dinner just keeps going on and on throughout the night and into the morning, and it actually ends with them like at like 6 in the morning or something, or later than that, but like early in the morning. It like ends on them, and they've been like just partying all night, and it seems like they just don't want to go home because like whatever they do, like they have some shit they have to deal with that's not going to be comfortable. And yeah, I think that's interesting how people sort of suppress things, and also like you were talking about how the movie has a lot of despicable characters, and I agree. But I just think to me, the movie is trying to capture something that's very like true to life. And in life, a lot of the people you interact with, like you don't know what they've done, what they've been through, what they've as far as you know, somebody you talk to in a coffee shop could be some weird killer, who knows. And I don't know. I'm just saying like you never know who you're dealing with, and there's always like weird little dark dramas going on. And like I've had like I remember like as a kid, I used to think a lot about like each house has its own like story going on in it. And I think that this movie, like, it's not about just because you compared to Slacker, and I can totally see that connection. But to me, Slacker, and I love Slacker, but Slacker is like it's sort of just observing connections and drifting through and just conversations. But this movie is like going into like dramas within each story,
Mm.
and I find that interesting how it does that.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, Slacker is much more of like a loose hangout movie, so in themes and tone, it's very different. I just mean like in the way that the stories touch each other and it shifts between people. Um, but yeah, I don't know. I just find myself kind of struggling with this movie a little bit. There were parts that I laughed at and enjoyed, but overall, I just feel like I didn't really know what he was getting at. Like, I mean, I get that it's kind of a slice of life thing, but I just don't. I just don't really know like why this slice, like why this slice,
Yeah,
and why this way. And I mean, I guess it's just kind of like I don't know, it's like the way that we like passively harm each other too, like because it seems like that's a little bit of what I'm getting at in the way that they're not bad people necessarily. They just do a lot of bad things, which is true. And I was thinking about that a lot while watching this, where it's like a lot of these situations are very real. A lot of the actions these actors go through are like very real. Like I even like at the beginning when like the little kid is watching his mom go back to bed and she like takes a wedgie or something, she's like scratching her ass, and I'm like, you'd never see that in movies really. And so there's just like this very kind of real true to life thing. Like all of their houses feel like very real and lived in, and like I love the mom who does sex work over the phone, and like her ledger with all of her stuff is covered in like graham crackers for her kids or like animal crackers or whatever. And so it feels like very grounded and tangible and real. And so I guess I just wonder like why I don't know. And again, maybe it's just like me not having like a very wide understanding of like Altman as a person and his perspective, but like coming from Brewster McCloud and then this, and then like my very kind of foggy memories of things like MASH, which I haven't seen for a while. It just feels like he almost has like a realistic but pessimistic view of people, which is not unrealistic and it's fair, but it just kind of feels like he does so much to highlight the ways that people are just like gross and mean. And like again, there's nothing wrong with that. I just wonder like why, like I wonder like what kind of he wants people to take away from this movie. Like if I were to walk out of Shortcuts and he's like, what do you think? Like, I wonder what he would like want me to say. Do you know what I mean? Like, I
yeah.
just feel like, I just wonder, like, I don't know. I just feel like I struggle a little bit with what he's ultimately trying to get at. And if it is something as simple as just like people suck sometimes and life is painful sometimes, that's okay. But I also just feel like the few times that you do see people experience joy, they're like trashed. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
people are only really like loose and comfortable when they're drinking in this movie, as far as I can remember. And the rest of the time, they're just kind of like suffering amongst each other. And so
Well, I
I
think
don't know.
alcoholism is a part of the movie. He talked about that a little bit in the documentary. I think
Hmm.
he's an alcoholic, or not an alcoholic, but he's had alcohol issues himself.
Hmm.
But I think that's definitely there. But as far as like his like kind of pessimistic view on people. I think there is like a cynicism throughout his work, but um to me, I think I just see it as like him trying to represent reality. Like there's good people. I don't want to say it like a dichotomy, like there's good people and bad people, but there's like he's just trying to represent like this stuff happens. There's people out there that do like really messed up things. And like he definitely does it in Brewster McCloud. Like in Brewster McCloud, like, you know, you have that guy who like abuses his wife and like is like saying racial slurs all the time. And then in this you have like a million different things. You have, you know, murderers and like like people who just like are choosing not to do the right thing.
Yeah.
But I think it's doing that to represent something that exists in reality, but it's also like trying to like create like a conflict within the story, but and some sort of drama. But yeah, I know it's weird because I see it as like almost like a comedy, not a comedy, but like there's a lot of comedic things through it, and but also a drama. But there is a lot of dark stuff throughout, like in almost every storyline. So
Yeah, there were some parts that really made me laugh. Like, I think the part that like made me just like actually like sit back and like laugh really hard was when the cop pulls over Claire, and he's being gross and creepy and everything, but then he's like, I have one other question. How many clowns can you fit in this car? And that really got me. That was so funny to me. I thought that was hilarious. And there were a couple other lines that were like very funny and stuff too. So yeah, I definitely agree. Like it has the same sort of comedy though that I saw a lot in Brewster McCloud. And I think I commented too where I was like, oh yeah, like that's funny, but like it wasn't necessarily making me laugh. But this one, like that, but especially like how many clowns can you? It's so funny.
yeah.
And then I also loved like when she was all in her like clown get up with her sunglasses on and she goes into the cake store and stuff too. I guess just like the clown bit really made me laugh, which I hate admitting that a clown made me laugh, but like in this specific situation, a clown made me laugh.
That reminded me of like weird experiences, and that's another thing about Alden's stuff is like it reminds me of just stuff from like my early childhood. Like maybe it's just like growing up in the '90s and like this movie feels very it's in 1993. It's shot in 1993 and takes place then, but like it feels like it captures like I don't want to say documentary in a documentary sense, but like it very much captures the feel of that time, like in a real way. And I remember like when I was a kid, like there being like lots of like clowns around and like going to like pizza places and there being like clowns, like some like a lady dressed up as a clown, like blowing up balloons. But, like you never see that now. Like I feel like people just hate clowns now.
Yeah, I mean, I think like when you're a kid, you just like see them as like a character, and then when you grow up, you're like, oh, this is this is like a whole person, and so it just
Yeah.
kind of like shifts your perspective a little bit, and then you're like, what kind of person is a clown? Which is like a lot of people, and people are like, it's a very normal profession and it's cool, but like your perspective just changes as a kid. Like how you can go to Chuck E. Cheese as a kid and be like, this giant, you know, animatronic rat is so cool, mom. And then like as an adult you're like, this is terrifying, why do kids like this? So yeah, I don't know, it's probably just a little bit like that. I have nothing personal against clowns, I just don't typically think they're very funny.
Yeah.
But each their own. But yeah, this had some pretty funny bits. I said that as if I was going to say another one of them and I forgot what I was gonna say. So what are some parts that made you laugh a lot?
Well, I don't know if I'm ever like really laughing out loud. Well, I find I do laugh out loud somewhat at, like Tim Robbins' character, the cop, and just like how much of an asshole he is.
Oh my God, yeah, like during the earthquake and he goes outside with the megaphone and he's like, this is the LAPD, there's an earthquake. And it's like, yeah.
Yeah. Well, I love it when they're spraying the like pesticide or whatever it is at the beginning, and then he's like, "Don't get environmental on me. It's not gonna give the dog cancer." And then he just like showers in it. He's like, you know, like sprint like getting it all over himself to try to prove a point. But I just like laugh at how much of like a dick he is there. But
Yeah. I like the whole movie because this movie has like a surprising body count for what it is. I was kind of hoping that like he would be one to just like eat dirt at some point, but he didn't. He made it out, without a scratch.
Well, it seems like there's always like a hopeful ending, and I don't know what to say like that they deserve it necessarily, but like with a lot of the people that do bad things, there's like a hopeful ending. Like with Lyle Lovett, who's the baker, like he like is calling. So that's one story, is that Andy McDowell and Bruce Davison, who are like he's the news anchor and the wife, and they have a son who's it's about to be his birthday, and then he ends up getting hit by a car, but then he gets up and he seems like he's fine. He was hit by Lily Tomlin, and he comes home and he has a concussion, and like the mom lets him fall asleep, and they take him to the hospital, and he ends up not waking up, and it's like this whole tragic thing. And I think a lot of that, there's some really emotional stuff in that, and I think that's kind of the core of the movie, like the through line of it. But if there is one, um, where was I going with that? I'm sorry.
A hopeful ending with the
Oh yeah. Sorry.
Yeah.
Like I was gonna say, like so after their son dies tragically, like they go and confront, because as they were waiting on their son to see if he's gonna be okay or not, they're getting these threatening like phone messages from Lyle Lovett, because Andy McDowell, the mom, like scheduled a cake to be made, and he's calling and he's like, like you're supposed to pick up the cake, and it's really ridiculous, like just like harassing him about a cake, and they go in to confront him, and it's this like sort of like intense scene, and like I almost wanted the guy to like beat him up, uh but then like he ends up like trying to like help him, and then he's like, I'm sorry, like I didn't know about like, and it seems like they sort of forgive each other, or they forgive him, and then also with the cop, he's doing all these terrible things, and he's also cheating on his wife with Frances McDormand, and then he decides to go bring the dog back, and then they go through the earthquake, and like it ends, their story ends on this like moment of them all hugging, and I thought that was nice. And I don't know, it's not to say that like any actions are justified, but like I don't know, it just, if I could say anything, like it's just like the message is just like people are people, people exist, and like we have to deal with it somehow. I guess.
Yeah, I think maybe just like maybe I was like misinterpreting some of this, because like when the dad went to get the dog back, like I thought he was doing that so that his kids would like leave him the fuck alone. Like I thought that like, he was like in the middle of having sex with his wife,
I do think
and
it's a
his
little bit
kid
that,
comes
yeah.
in to interrupt, and he's like, oh, you want your dog? Well, turns out the cops, like I got the whole cop station looking for your dog, and like guess what, like after this, let's go find your dog. Like I thought it was just to get his kids off his back. Like I didn't interpret it at all as him doing it because he loved his family. I thought he hated his family.
I don't think he hated his family. I just think he hated his dog, and he has weird issues with the wife. But I never got the sense that he hated his kids. But yeah, I'm not saying he's a great guy, because he does a lot of gross stuff. But like, I don't know, like I think the movie's trying to be challenging in a sense, and like showing some of these characters, because you also have characters like Chris Penn, who's the wife of Jennifer, or not the wife, the husband of Jennifer Jason Leigh. There's the phone sex worker, and he's getting all like pent up and like weird, and is like having sexual frustration.
Why do you talk to me like that? Jesus Christ.
Yeah, and then he ends up like killing somebody at the end, and like you have stuff like that where it's just not. There's no justification for that at all, obviously, but like it's just, I don't know where I was going with that. I'm just saying that there's bad people. There's like one end. There's like bad, and then you like kind of go backwards and like just towards like levels of bad. I don't know. I guess.
Yeah, that's like one of the things. Like honestly, I did not like the ending at all. I low key hated it. And like that part was one thing where I just didn't. I just didn't understand like what they were trying to like say, and it honestly made me like really frustrated because it's like Robert Downey Jr. and the gal that he walked off with, they like left the other two to like go, whatever. And they see him like beating her to death with a rock, and they're like, what are you doing? And then the earthquake happens and you don't see from them again, but then later you hear in the news like, oh, and there was one fatality from rocks that fell on a hiker. And so you're supposed to interpret that the group who saw him beat this girl to death were like, well, we don't want you to get in trouble for murdering this girl in cold blood, so let's pretend rocks fell on her. Like, I just don't like understand. And then like to end that like on that note where it's like, I just don't like, it's just a lot of things like that where I'm like, what, like how am I supposed to feel about this? Like, how am I supposed to understand this? Um, because like I mean, like I understand like people do terrible things, but like murdering someone in cold blood and then having a stranger and your best friend cover for you just seems like, it's just things like that where I'm like, I don't get it. I don't get it. And I wanna understand. And so I just feel like do you know what I mean? Like I just don't.
Yeah.
And there were like a few other loose ends too that I didn't really understand. And like with the baker, like it's like they had that reconciliation and then she's like, oh, can I see the cake? And he's like, I threw it away. And that was like kind of the end of their story. And so you're like, how do I feel about this? And then like the only people who are really like happy at the end are the ones who are like on a bender pretty much. And so you're just like, I just don't understand where it's like,
Only way to be happy is to go on a bender, is the message.
I mean, like I have a glass of wine right here. You don't have to convince me. I just maybe it's just me as a viewer, and like maybe it's just me and like my perspective where like I don't necessarily want, I don't need, and I definitely don't want all the time for there to be like some Disney bink happy ending. But if there's going to be like this kind of piecing apart of like the dark parts of life, like why? Like for
Yeah.
what? And so I think for me, I just am struggling to find that meaning for myself, because this definitely feels, like you said, like a lot of these things kind of remind you of your childhood and things that you've experienced. Hopefully none of the bad ones.
Yeah.
The clown parts are what we remember. And so
It's
it's
mostly
like
just
I
the
guess
kid stuff. Like the kid watching Captain Planet. I used to watch Captain Planet.
that was so funny where the kid comes home to like the trashed house and they just sit down and they're like, here's a note for you, mom. Anyway. So it's
Yeah.
like I maybe the part of it is like you see a little bit of your life and you kind of are just like, yeah, like maybe it's the catharsis that you would get of like listening to an angry song when you're angry or a sad song when you're sad, and you're like, yeah, thank you for just showing the way that life just can suck sometimes. Like maybe that's what it is. But like even then, like to end on the note it ended on, like I think that's where I get the sense of like his pessimistic perspective on people. Love an alliteration, or a bit of alliteration there. But yeah, pessimistic perspective on people where it's just like i don't I just don't like understand like what I'm supposed to like gain from this. But maybe it's just that like it could just be like it's not for me, or maybe it's one that like I'll come back to in 10 years after I get hit by a car and I'm like, wow, I really like this really hits, like
Yeah.
choice of words. I don't know, I just felt like I kept waiting for it to come together. I kept waiting for it to culminate in something, and I just never kind of felt like it reached any sort of ultimate point. I mean, not to be like, but like I don't really understand like what the core like thesis of the film is, and not to be like all, you know,
Mhm.
too analytical about it. But I also just feel like there's so much happening that like he has to be trying to say, wow, blah, 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 blah. He has to be trying to say something. Maybe, I don't know. Maybe it's just me. I don't like the way it ended.
Yeah.
I
Well, I
don't
find the
know.
ending the most challenging thing in the movie for sure, and I still don't know that I
Yeah.
totally can explain or that like I totally get where he was going with that. But it was interesting. I was watching the documentary, and he was saying that he was describing Robert Downey Jr.'s character and saying that Robert Downey Jr. is kind of the guy that would like. This seems stupid, but like I don't like the guy that would like egg him on or just like like be like a bad influence, but then when something terrible happens, like be like like I never thought he would do that, or like something like that. But
Yeah.
I just yeah
He never seemed like that kind of guy. Yeah.
yeah, but
Yeah.
I don't. It is weird to end it on that, and then to have the moment with the news thing where like they say that she died of the rock fall, but like I guess I never interpreted it as they like them covering it up for him. I never thought like I thought it was just coincidence, like that
Oh,
they
like somebody else died?
well just that they left and like who knows what happened, but then like later like cops like found like a bloody body with rocks falling on top of it and just assumed that that's what happened.
But what about the girl's like friend?
I don't know. And that's why I say like I just never thought of it as like because I don't know why the friend would try to cover up for them.
That's what I'm
Um,
saying. But like maybe that was the thing though, and it was just like maybe somebody else died, but like the ambiguity
yeah,
I don't know. And then like I don't really like the way that like the jazz singer's story ended with her daughter, where like her daughter is basically like working on this whole musical career and she has this like band that she's working with and they clearly care about her and like but like her mom won't give her the time of day so she's like I guess I'm going to kill myself. Like it just feels like I don't know. I almost wonder like if I would have benefited from reading these stories. Like I wonder if there's like I think I'm struggling because I feel like I'm missing something and I don't know if I'm actually missing something or if I'm just looking for something that's not there. And this is exactly what happened with the last Altman movie that we watched where I'm just like, am I missing something? And like I don't know. And so I don't know. I'm almost wondering if like maybe Altman just like isn't really the director for me. Like not to say that he's a bad director, but I just feel like
well, I would say at least watch Three Women and then decide.
yeah, I know I should watch that one. I should watch some of his like more like critically acclaimed stuff because this is a little bit more of like a deep cut. Like you can't even really stream this one. I had to get some help from you to be able to watch it.
Mhm.
But yeah, I just feel like with any art, there's art and artists that you connect with, and then there's art and artists that you can appreciate, but maybe don't like speak to your experience necessarily. And I think maybe that's what's happening here with Altman, where like he's saying very real, direct, like important things, and he is a great filmmaker. Like this film was like so well constructed. I really liked the way everything ties together. I loved a lot of the camera movements and like the way that he would layer the stories. Some of my favorite parts of the film were like when multiple characters would be having conversations on top of each other, like early on when he's like cleaning the pool and there's a lady on the balcony shouting and then there's like the other conversation happening, like those like very energetic scenes I was like totally just like hooked on. But I wonder if like maybe he's just speaking to something that like is not my experience and so I'm having a difficult time connecting with like his filmmaking.
Mhm.
um I don't know and it's like maybe I'll like have a moment where it kind of clicks a little bit more. I mean, I'm I haven't seen it all, I haven't done it all, I'm still just a wee babe in the grand scheme of things. So maybe it's just like, a little bit more live-in and his stuff will connect with me more. But for right now, I just kind of like, I feel like I can appreciate what he's doing, but I don't understand why. And that's okay, like maybe it's just not for me, or maybe I just need to like read more people's perspectives on it. I don't know.
Yeah, to me it was just more about like it was just creating like a tapestry of like life experiences, or I don't know, just trying to capture a time and a place, and not necessarily in the sense of like a period piece, but just like
It kind of is in a way, though, like unintentionally.
Well, yeah, exactly. That's like him doing it at the moment and capturing the moment really well, and then it does almost feel like a period piece. I was
With
gonna say
those brick
I wore.
phones.
I'm sorry. Go.
Oh, with like the brick phones, like
Oh
very
yeah,
much period piece. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
yeah, for sure. Well, some of the clothes, like I wore this today, this shirt, because I specifically remember buying this shirt because it reminded me of the colors and shortcuts.
No way.
Yeah. For
That's
some of the
great.
like the
That's cool.
weird like pinks and yellows and oranges, like they have like I don't even know how to explain '90s style, but it's very strange. But I like it.
Lots of neon, lots of like leftover neon from the 80s, but like a little bit of grunge. Yeah, I know what you
Mhm.
mean. Um, yeah,
And
I
definitely
remember that a
early
lot from
'90s
a kid.
style,
That's
which
pretty
is
good.
like kind of left over from the '80s,
Sorry?
and definitely early '90s style, like left over from the '80s, like you were saying.
Yeah, especially like 93, because I mean, he probably shot a lot of that, what, in like 92 and then
Hmm.
finished it in 93. So yeah, you're getting like early 90s crawling out of the 80s cocaine haze.
Yeah,
um, but yeah, I mean, there were a lot of moments. I mean, I kind of touched on a couple, like the way that he would layer the stories and stuff, but there were a lot of moments that I really liked. I mean, you've kind of mentioned like the fisherman finding the body a couple of times, and I think like as terrible as it is, like there's something that felt so real about that, where it's just like you are so kind of like stunned as to what to do that you're like, I guess we'll just do nothing. And
we'll
it's
just keep
like,
fishing.
obviously, huh?
We'll just keep fishing.
Right. And it's like disgusting that they would be standing like meters away from this, woman who's been like brutalized and murdered, and they're just like, got four, but four got away. And you're just like, what's wrong with you? But then it's like you think about like in daily life when these terrible things happen, and it's like I've been guilty of this too, where like, I mean, even just last week I got an email and I was just like, I don't even know how to respond to this, and so I just like closed that email and went and did something else to try to figure out how you even feel about it, or like how to even process them. And like, granted, it wasn't
Mhm.
even this dramatic, it was just like a work thing, but we've all been there. um but it's just like trying to even figure out how to deal with things that happen. And maybe that's part of this movie too, is just like trying to figure out how to fucking deal with this shit when it's so bad. And so you see
I
like,
definitely think that's part of it for sure. Yeah,
right, and so you're seeing like when bad things happen, how people respond to them. And yeah, actually I think that saying that out loud made me feel like this movie makes a lot more sense, because it actually makes the suffering kind of make sense, where it's just like when things happen like an earthquake, that where it's just like totally earth shattering. Wow, I'm like out of control. Where it just like shakes everything up, literally or metaphorically, emotionally, and like you don't even know what to do. And yeah, I mean, people respond violently, or they leave, like the dad did when there was the news guy and his kid was in the hospital, and then his like long lost dad appears and is like, I've loved you all these years and lived 15 miles away, but I had to stay, all this stuff. And
Mhm.
so it's like his response was to leave. A lot of people's response is to drink. um Unfortunately for one character, it was to like kill herself. And so it's just like, I guess you see the way that people are like coping with it. I don't know. I don't know. But it like,
I think coping is definitely a thing. Like with the
yeah,
person who commits suicide, like I actually like that story, and I know it's like it's obviously tragic and it seems weird and like it doesn't quite connect. Like it seems extreme, but I feel a lot of times when people commit suicide, it is extreme. But that's how it comes off, and people don't know how to take it. And I think they do seed it. Like they start in that story with her like you know floating in the pool and just sort of playing dead, and then later she's like
was that the
like
same girl?
yeah. Hmm. And then the mom, she's the jazz singer. She like throws like an ice cube and is like, "Stop doing that! Like, you know, you're not fooling me."
I thought they were different people.
Oh no, that's the jazz singer and the you know, the girl, the cello
Oh,
player.
okay, that makes a lot more sense because I remember the pool cleaning scene where they do that really great pan, like at the end of the scene, back up to her in the window. I love the framing of that shot, by the way, where it's like
Mm-hmm.
a house and then you can kind of see her through, and she's like hidden away a little bit, which is like some great kind of like visual storytelling about like how far removed she is from everything. Um, but yeah, I didn't actually put together that that was the same girl. I thought for some reason that it was like I was confusing her with the girl who was playing basketball. But wait, is that the same
That's
girl?
the same person. Yeah.
What?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, right. Okay. Oh, this is why I shouldn't watch a movie right before we review it. Also, there's a lot of characters, so I'm going to cut myself a little bit of slack there, give myself a little bit
Yeah.
of grace for thinking they were different people. I thought they were neighbors on either side, and I thought that there was like the friendly neighbor and then like the aloof. Okay, this makes a lot more sense. But I'm sorry, I'll let you finish your thought because yeah, they do see that of like her being in the pool. I just needed to like get my brain together.
Yeah. I just think they see her like doing some sort of like self harm or having some sort of depression. But
Yeah.
like the thing is, like, I think she and Robert Altman talks about this in the documentary, but like she plays cello and like that's her way of getting out like what she can't express in terms of words or like actually talking to her mom. She gets it out through her music,
Right.
and and that's another way we were talking about, like the way people cope with alcohol or they cope with whatever. She copes through music,
Right.
and then it sort of comes to a head because she has this. And honestly, I mean, I don't TMI, but like I have like a relationship with my parents where I don't know how to communicate with them sometimes,
Mm,
and so I can kind of relate to that in the terms of like, not to say, but like I can see how that character has this strange relationship with her mom where she doesn't know how to communicate everything that she's feeling because her mom is just like flippant and doesn't like, you know, really seem to care all that much. You know, when she tells her that Casey died, the kid, she's just like, "Oh man, that sucks," and like doesn't really. It's just like whatever. And there's some sort of a weird unspoken way that they don't connect, and and then she ends up like committing suicide. And I actually find it really emotional when like one, she was just the jazz singer was just, you know, expressing like not really expressing any emotion at the neighbor kid dying. And then like pretty quickly after that she has to deal with her own daughter dying, and I find it emotional how, you know, she's all like, you know, seems kind of pent up and not expressing anything or any sort of emotion, but then it's very emotional and you can tell that she's a person, and she is like when she like opens the garage and finds her daughter laying there. I thought it was a really good scene.
yeah, I agree. And I think that it does make sense too. And like if we're talking about like means of escapism, and at first I can relate with family stuff too. I mean, I think it's, you know, if we're talking about the ways that like people put up appearances and like there's, you know, a truer side to life that people keep hidden. I think a lot of people have that with family. And it's a hard thing to talk about. It's personal. But I can understand and relate. And I think that, you know, what's happening with that jazz singer mom is like you see her like in this constant state of grief, but like she can't function. So like she's always drunk. She's drunk at home, she's drunk at work. And then you see like when she's singing and when she's like open and trying to connect with people through art. Like she talks about her husband. She's like, oh, back when, you know, back when we were singing together, this happened. And I think I maybe I'm misremembering, but her husband died. I can't remember if he died from suicide as well or if it was something else. But like she's clearly very traumatized by his death and has kept coped with that through drinking and everything. And you can see the way that she's become very emotionally removed from everything because it hurts too much. It hurts too much to feel. And so hearing about the neighbor kid, this 8-year-old kid who died tragically the day before his birthday, like, of course she's not going to give that any emotion because she can't. Like, to open up your heart is to like let it all out, and that's too much, you know, especially after so many years of like building that wall. It's simply too much. And so, you know, I like the connection you made of like, you know, emotionally compartmentalizing and distancing from the neighbor child who died, and then having to like very viscerally and, you know, directly face that when it's your own child. But I also think it's interesting that we see her immediately go back into the same cycle where like she rushes to her daughter and everything, but then the next time we see her, she is upstairs in the same room where her daughter was playing cello, where we've always seen her drunk, and she's drunk again. And then the movie actually closes out like in the credits, like she's singing and like giving her performance again, and it's just like she's dealing with the trauma the way that she always has. And so you can almost see like when she was having that conversation with her daughter in the bar when she was rehearsing with the band, like that was the exact same coping mechanism where like she could not have that conversation with her daughter, so she was like, why don't you just sit right here and I'm going to go do what I do to cope with trauma. But her daughter didn't understand that and took that as like she needed the support, and her mom wasn't able to give her that support. And so like you said, it was like the missed connection there, which is very sad. So yeah, I think that, you know, it's very true and real, and you just kind of like see the cycles of the substance dependency and, you know, all of these different things. But I also just want to say quickly, like, it's so true of like how art can help people connect. Like, I truly believe that art does save people's lives and music saves people's lives, whether as a performer or as a listener. So I appreciate that element of it. But then it almost makes me wish that like we had seen the daughter like leave, but then like leave to pursue her art and herself rather than dying. But you know, it feeds more into the jazz singer's story, which is more of what we see through the film. And it almost feels like her daughter is a side character to her story. And when you understand that they're individual short stories, it makes sense. I'm talking a lot, blah, 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 but like, yeah, I kind of wish that it had ended differently for that story, for that thread. But at the same time, it completely makes sense. And now that this is like, now that I'm like piecing this into the puzzle frame of like, you know, coping with trauma, the movie makes a lot more sense to me. I still don't necessarily like the ending, and it doesn't really make sense to me, but I feel more comfortable with the themes in the movie, if that makes sense.
Yeah, there's a lot of trauma that just lays there. Like, there's all kind of layers of it. Like Lily Taylor, she's Robert Downey Jr.'s girlfriend, and she ends up being the daughter of Lily Tomlin. But then there's like stuff with like her talking about how like Earl, the drunk husband, and that's another layer of alcoholism, like abused her at some point, and that's never really dealt with other than just like it's talked about. And Lily Tomlin says like, you know, I've heard you say that story like one too many times. And it's another thing of like her just being shut down and being like, we're not going to confront this right now. But after the earthquake, like you said, I mean, it's just like at the end of the movie, there's just like a giant like catharsis, and like everybody has to like just release and like deal with their shit, and it's a lot like Magnolia. I mean, how it's a Magnolia too through the frog raining, but yeah.
It almost makes me think too of like, obviously very different from Melancholia in terms of like themes and stuff, but also in terms of like separate stories that are, you know, tied together in a way and then lead to like some cataclysmic event at the end. Not that an earthquake is cataclysmic, but they
I
all
think it's
thought it
cataclysmic in
was.
like a in Magnolia they have it cataclysmic in like an unreal way. It's completely fantastical. But the way this movie does it, it's cataclysmic in a way that's just like this happens. There's earthquakes that happens not all the time, but fairly often. And
Yeah, I think it was funny too that they were all like, "Oh, this is the big one! It's the big one!" And then they're like, "It's not the big one."
yeah,
I've never experienced an earthquake and it seems terrifying. Like I know people in California, it's just like another Tuesday, but like to me that would be terrifying.
Yeah, I never experienced it either. But
Yeah.
yeah, it would be crazy.
I'd rather keep it that way. I've seen San Andreas. I've seen San Andreas. I know what's gonna happen.
Have you
Um,
experienced any natural disasters?
I mean, no. Living in Colorado, there have been like some really gnarly blizzards and stuff, and I've definitely like had some close calls with my safety because of the snow, but nothing where I'm like, I gotta get out of nature's path. Like
Yeah.
it's Twister or something.
Here in Houston,
Yeah,
we
like,
have hurricanes. Like I was in Hurricane Harvey.
oh, that's so
Um,
scary.
yeah. And then even just this year, I was literally, this was like early January of this year. I was literally like, I pulled over to a gas station and I shouldn't have even been driving because I knew it was gonna be terrible weather. But I pulled over to a gas station and then right where I pulled over, not a hurricane, a tornado directly hit me, not or directly hit the gas station. At least as far as I know, this is what I've heard has happened because the doors were flying open and the glass broke and I was really like terrified. I never experienced anything like that. I ran into the gas station and people were like freaking out and I literally thought like I didn't think the world was ending. I just thought it was terrible. Like it was insane. I'd never experienced anything like that. And I'm as far as I know, it didn't pass pretty quickly, but as far as I know, I'm pretty sure a tornado hit directly where I was. So I was in a tornado.
Dude, that sounds like you were living like the beginning of The Mist, you know, and you're like, oh, this natural disaster is happening. I need to run inside the store.
That's exactly as I thought. As I looked out at the glass, like through the outside, I was looking out. I thought of the mist. Yeah,
There's something out there.
yeah.
Yeah. Well, I'm really glad we had this conversation because I think if I had just watched this by myself and hadn't had the opportunity to kind of like talk through some of these things, I probably would have just left with this like as confused as I was when I came into it. So I'm really glad we had this conversation. And I do think that it's a good movie. And there are a lot of parts of it, like I said, that I really enjoyed. And he does just like, I don't know. It's like this weird. You kind of said that it's like a timepiece in a way.
Hmm.
A period piece, not a time, not a timepiece, a period piece. And I feel like it. I lost my train of thought because I started thinking about watches. Yikes. Um, wow, I genuinely lost my train of thought.
We're
Never
just talking about it
mind.
being like a period piece.
No, I was going to say something about like how it encapsulates something, but I forgot what. I don't know. I don't know. I'm sorry. This is really embarrassing.
That's all right.
No, I'm sure it'll come back around to me. Oh well. I think I wanted to say something about like how he captures like, oh yeah, there's like almost like a I don't want to say like anthropological
Mhm.
necessarily because that like implies a certain amount of like study of it, of like life, but and I don't know that it's that deep necessarily, but I think the way that he like his curiosity with life and with like how people live and conduct their lives and interact with each other and how people understand themselves is really interesting. And so, while it's very much this kind of like slice of an era, like in terms of aesthetics and like style and music and all of this brick phones, there's also this kind of like anthropological perspective of how people live, not just in that certain time but in general. I mean, obviously we kind of just talked about all of it in terms of like coping methods, but also just like, yeah, in small talk, like when the two couples are having the dinner party and you know just like these kind of like elements of life, I think he captures really well, and you can sense like how observant he is. And I know that it's adapted from these stories, but I feel like that also ties into it, like to have a resonance with those stories speaks to a certain amount of understanding in yourself. And so I think to like take these stories, connect with them, and then reinterpret them, granted with another writer too, but to the screen, and then convey them in a certain way, does kind of like capture some anthropological element in studying like how people live. And I really like that. Yeah, like I mean, it's all of the little details that are so good. Like, I mean, I already talked about like the ledger with like the animal crackers on it and stuff, but just like those things are like bad interior design, you know, and just like there's so many little details like in the set design and stuff too. Like I remember during one of the like aggressive phone calls and the guy's like, don't fucking call here or whatever, like in the bedroom, it's just like gross style, but then they have like a TV on one of those rolling racks, and it's just like, I don't know, it's all of these little details that feel so real that would normally be polished out of film, that we get here and we get to experience, and we get to like actually see ourselves as people in something rather than like a glossed over version of what it is to be alive. And so I do appreciate that like raw perspective. I'm rambling, but yeah, yeah, I feel like he's really good at that. And then to capture it with humor, you know, like it's dark, but you have to laugh at it. That's something that I'm working on in my life. But yeah, you know, I don't know where I was going with that. I think I just wanted to comment on, I think it's great how he does capture people with so much curiosity, you know? Like there's obviously like he has an understanding of people to be able to tell these stories, but in that there's also like, but why, you know? And I appreciate that about his filmmaking.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, so do I. And I think he does capture the time in a really interesting way. Like we are talking about, like the brick phones. I love like the moment where they're fishing and they discover the dead body, and they talk about like calling the cops. And he's like, "How are you going to call the cops? Like, what do you have, an Orvis cellular phone?" And
Right.
because they don't have a phone out there in the woods with them. But
It was like a 4 hour hike or something up there. Yeah.
yeah, but I just, it's weird little moments, and then like when they're exchanging the pictures, and they're at this like photo booth, like these like this standalone photo booth, because I still remember those.
Me
And this is,
too.
yeah, like there'd be some like just parking lots, usually these like little photo huts, and that's where they were, like, you know, processing these pictures. But yeah, it captures some of that weird minutia of the '90s in an interesting way.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I was trying to think of some other bit of 90s minutia, but I couldn't. Yeah, great stuff. I don't know, was there anything else you wanted to add? I feel like I'm drawing a blank for some reason.
No, I think that's pretty much it.
Yeah.
For me, it's personally a 5. I think it's an amazing movie. My dream is to see it on 70 millimeter. I was doing some research, and there was a 70 millimeter blow up at the time that it came out. So you would have it like it was shot on 35 millimeter, but then they projected it in certain screenings, not everywhere, but they had it projected on 70 millimeter. I think that'd be amazing to see. I think they actually played it at a 70 millimeter festival just like a year ago. But
Oh, that's so cool.
yeah, so I'd love to see it like that. But yeah, it's one of my favorite movies. It's probably in my top 10, and I gave it a 5. Yeah.
Yeah, well, let me, I know you've kind of said a little bit, but like, is there something in particular that puts it in your top 10 or like really solidifies it as a favorite? Because I know you really like Altman, so like, why this Altman above the rest?
But there's like a vibe to it. It's hard to even put into words. Like, I love the way he captures life, and I love the way it feels like lived in, and it feels real. It almost feels like documentary esque, while it's still like it still is doing something artistically and cutting it together and like having these like, you know, intricate dramas. And it is like a fictional film, but like it just feels very real, and I feel like he captures reality in a really interesting way.
Mm,
And there's just a weird, even though a lot of the stuff in the movie that happens is dark, um, I I there's just like a vibe to it that I love. I can like a lot of times when I put it on, I can't help but just watch, if not all of it, at least like half of it. And I heard, this is a weird reference, but Mark Maron was actually talking about it one time, and he was talking about how like there's a lot of dark stuff that happens in it, but he almost feels like it's like a celebration of life in a weird
Huh.
way. And
That's a weird way.
but I kind of agree. I feel like it is a weird, strange celebration of life.
Yeah, I mean, for all its mess, all the piss, shit, murder, blood, dirt, yeah, that's as much life as the rest of it, you know? So yeah, I can appreciate that. Sorry, I live off a busy street, so I'm sure you can hear
No
the
problem.
um, but yeah, I know we're kind of wrapping up, but since I kind of have your brain cooking, I'm wondering like what you think about even like the title of the film and the way that it's presented. Like obviously Shortcuts feels like, okay, well it's short stories that are cut together. But then like even on the cover of the Blu-ray you're holding up, it's like this broken heart with all of these like jagged little pieces. Like, do you feel like that ties into it at all? Did you think, like, what do you think about that element? If you've thought about it. I mean, I'm pulling at pieces here. So if this is, I don't know, just what, do you have any thoughts?
Well, in terms of the heart, I think it's mostly just that a lot of the stories have to do with love and like cheating and heartbreak and all that stuff. And in terms of shortcuts, like you said, obviously it's like a short story. It's like there's a lot of those like interwoven into it. But also, I think that, like in the end credits, they show like a map and just like the map of LA, like, and it just is like zooming through that. But
Oh, that's
I feel
interesting.
like, yeah, and I feel like it's almost like shortcuts. Like, if you're going somewhere, you're gonna shortcut to this place, and I feel like it's some sort of metaphor for just the way it connects, like connecting to different characters, shortcutting to this person and that person. So that's sort of how I interpreted it.
That's exactly the kind of thing I was hoping you were going to say. I had a feeling there was like some little thing, some little nugget that I could pull out of you there. Because I think that's so true. Like, I didn't even think about the map at the end, but like, yeah, like shortcuts between lives, like just kind of, finding these ways of connecting. That's interesting. I like that. Um, what am I going to rate this film, Drew? Drew, what am I going to rate this film? I don't know. I'm torn between like a strong 3.5 and like a soft 4. I feel like I'm saying the exact same things that I said during Brewster McCloud, and so maybe this is just like me in taking Altman's perspective. But yeah, I feel like I've kind of been left with a similar feeling after this one, and I'm just not quite sure where I land. I'm going to go ahead and go with not a soft, but a solid 4. I'll go with like a very balanced 4 because it does a lot and I think it does it well. There are parts for me that didn't work as much, but also room to grow. This is my first watch, not my 8th. So there's plenty of time. And it is such a big movie. Like he loves these like huge ensemble casts and these like very like he loves like these macro stories, I feel like he enjoys like all of these little figurine characters and moving them around and so and this movie's 3 hours long, and so I feel like upon a rewatch and like sitting with it again and knowing what's going to happen, I'll be able to pull more from the individual stories rather than just kind of waiting to see what happens. So yeah, I feel like a 4 fairly reflects where I'm at right now. But I could see myself going higher on a rewatch. I should get my hands on that Blu-ray too, so that I can see the documentary and get inside Altman's mind.
Yeah.
I don't know why this is me. This is like my brain waves. But yeah, like maybe I just need to spend a little bit more time. I need to watch Three Women. And I feel like, if there was like I need to find like an Altman biography, you know what I mean? Like I need to kind of just I feel like I just don't really understand like him as an artist, and I think that if I did and I kind of like understood his life and his perspective and like what he wants to say with these films, I would be able to find more of his intention in these films rather than being like a little bit lost in them. But I really think that like this conversation and your input has helped me understand a lot. So yeah, I'll just say again, I'm really thankful for this conversation. And I'm really glad that like you wanted to share this film with me. That means so much to you, because like I definitely understand that, and this has such a strong like emotional core to it that I appreciate. And yeah, he's a great director. Thanks so much for like shoving me into the Altman pool. I mean, like as I'd said, I'd only ever really seen stuff from him before as a kid, and now you've had me watch two. Maybe our next one should be Three Women, so you can crack the whip on me to watch that one too.
Yeah, I'd
And
be down
this
for
will
that.
just
It's one of
become
my
an
favorites
Altman
too.
review channel.
Yeah, pretty
Um,
much. But yeah, I'm
yeah,
glad that conversation helped for sure.
yeah,
Yeah, and yeah, I mean, I think it was. I love watching this movie. It was an early performance for Julianne Moore. She was later in Magnolia. I forgot to mention, like, the cast is stacked. Like, you have,
he got everybody in this movie.
yeah,
He's like, bring your friend's friend. Like, I was watching this because it was like, yeah, Robert Downey Jr., Frances McDormand, Tom Waits. Love
mhm,
Tom Waits, a young Tom Waits too. And I'm like, you're not even Tom Waits yet. You're like Tom Waits 1.0.
yeah,
So yeah, you're right. Stacked cast.
yeah, yeah. So I really enjoyed it, and yeah, thanks for watching it. Even though I know I kind of sprung on you a 3 hour movie,
No,
but
I love long movies. I mean, if you like DM'd me and you're like, you want to watch a 6.5 hour movie, I'd be like, sign me up. So yeah,
yeah,
there's no film too long for me. I love that kind of stuff. I mean, if you couldn't tell, like by my tangents and like very long stretches of dialogue, I can definitely vibe with
yeah,
this. Yeah,
yeah, for sure. Yeah, well, thanks again. Thanks for being here, and thanks for watching it.
yeah.
And yeah, I think that's pretty much it. But yeah, thank you, and thanks everyone for watching.
Thanks, Drew.
And yeah, thanks, and we'll see you next time. Bye.
Bye.